Hey beauties, welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I will be participating in the popular eyeshadow palette tag that I've seen going around YouTube. It was started by Allie, Glines, and Samantha March. I'm sure there have been plenty of similar tags created, over the years, but for today's video, I will be following the prompts listed in their videos. I'm a little late to the game. I'm sure you know how this goes down. But before we begin, if you're new here, welcome. I'm so happy to have you. This is our pink sparkly bubble on YouTube where we talk about luxury beauty, fragrance, some fashion, everything glam. I hope you'll join our community by subscribing. Don't forget to hit the notification bell and the like button, and let's go ahead and begin. So the first question is to show your newest palette, and I have two. This is a twofer because I just picked up the new Dior Color Games collection. Ooh, it just arrived. So here I have the Dive palette, $287, and then I'm wearing this Sprint palette, $897. I love both of these. I'm not sure what order I'm going to post these videos, but you should be able to find a tutorial on this look on my channel. You'll definitely be able to see the review of the collection. I generally always like the limited palettes that Dior comes out with. They're seasonal palettes. They're always really beautiful. I have a feeling this collection was supposed to be inspired by the Olympics, which were taking place this year. I think this blue palette is one of my favorite, if not my absolute favorite blue palette. I had so much fun creating a look with that. And then this is just so pretty. It's a little bit more wearable. This orange is gorgeous. I would pick this up just for the orange and pink because it's a different pink. We've seen a lot of pink. I know a lot of people are sick of pink. They think it's been overdone, but this is more of a bubblegum, very light sort of Barbie pink. So it's nice as just kind of a little pop. I have it underneath the lower lash line today. And then you have browns and a cream. It's pretty neutral, pretty wearable. Naturally, the follow-up is to show your oldest palette. I am pretty good about decluttering. I know I recently showed a declutter video, but I'm constantly decluttering. I hate clutter. I hate having too much stuff. So this is my oldest palette. This is the Tissé Rivoli 226 from Chanel. This came with me from Nashville. So it's probably maybe 5 or 6 years old, which is pretty old. It's definitely old for an eyeshadow palette, but I don't have some of my really old palettes. I know I recently decluttered a couple Buxom palettes that I had created, the little customizable palettes. I got rid of those. I even went through some of the makeup in my bathroom trying to search for something really old, and it just doesn't exist anymore. What can I say? I'm a clean freak. I go through everything regularly, and if I think it's old and I think it's dirty, grimy, I'm never gonna use it, it goes in the trash can. So this I'm holding on to, and I never use it. I don't think I would use it. I think it's kind of past the point of no return in terms of actually applying these eyeshadows. But I guess I am somewhat nostalgic about it. This was my go-to palette when I first started at the Chanel counter. I loved Rivoli. I used it on all of my clients. I wore this every single day. I'm surprised it's not worn down more than it is. It had a good life. I'll hold on to it probably, I don't want to say forever. Nothing's forever, but I will hold on to it for a very long time. It's small enough, it's compact enough, it doesn't take up a ton of room, and there are just so many fond memories attached to this palette. The next one is a spicy one. It's show your most expensive palette. And I almost prefaced this video by letting you guys know that this was probably going to be the most boring eyeshadow palette tag video out there on the interwebs, because I'm pretty boring when it comes to eyeshadow palettes. I'm so carefully curated that I don't have this huge collection. I generally shy away from larger eyeshadow palettes, so I don't have a ton of super crazy expensive palettes here, but my most expensive is this Soleil Eye and Cheek palette from Tom Ford. I picked this up years ago, and it's so beautiful. When I purchased this, it was on sale for $155. I was looking up the price, so I just kind of Googled it, and you can buy this on eBay for over $200. So somebody held on to their palette, and they're trying to flip it for a profit. This was the 01 Cool. And they used to come out with these in the Soleil Blanc packaging. They did it, I think, 2 years in a row, and then for whatever reason they stopped. and I haven't seen these come out lately. Of course, they came out with the new cheek eye palettes that are in the mahogany packaging. Based on photos, I think they're somewhat underwhelming. This, I think, is beautiful. This cheek, oh my gosh, the blush is so pretty. The highlight is even really pretty because it kind of has a kind of pinky peach undertone. I do love the packaging. I think as long as you love all of the colors inside, it's kind of a good deal. You know, of course it's not an incredible value, but you get a blush, you get a highlighter, and the eye quad. So it's like 3 products in one. You just can't invest in a palette like this if you hate the blush, or the highlight doesn't work for you, or you're not a big fan of any of the shades. The entire thing has to be amazing to justify $155. Next, of course, I have to show you my least expensive palette. Now, because I've done so much decluttering over the years, I really don't have a lot of my cheapy palettes. I don't have a lot of my super old palettes. A lot of my really old palettes, my first palettes, were pretty inexpensive. You know, I did not start purchasing luxury makeup. I started where a lot of people do, with drugstore products. I started with MAC, Clinique. You know, even when I shopped in a department store, I generally shopped for the less expensive brands. I picked up a few drugstore products, but I never really got into drugstore makeup. My mom always would take me to the Clinique counter, and that was like a girl's shopping trip. So when I was really young and I was starting in makeup, she wanted me to learn how to apply makeup in a natural, flattering way. So we would go to the Lancome counter or the Estee Lauder counter, anyone who had a gift with purchase, and that's really kind of how I got started in makeup. Of course, once I became, you know, teenager, off to college, then I really got into MAC. And I did have a couple MAC palettes. So my least expensive palette that I've held on to, I should say that, is this Norvina palette from Anastasia. Don't want you to think I just started with all luxury makeup. I don't have anything inexpensive. I had plenty of inexpensive makeup. It's just over time, it's kind of been filtered out. And I picked this up on sale. I didn't even pick this up when it first launched. I remember thinking it was really pretty, but then not long after, there was some sort of 15-20% off. So I think I picked this up for maybe $25, which was really reasonable. I got this right before our wedding 2 Christmases ago, 2018. One Christmas. It must have been November 2018 when I picked this up. I was so happy to get it on sale. Now this is an incredible value. For all of these eyeshadows, I don't really touch this anymore. I keep it in the bathroom because you just get so much fallout. I love these shimmery eyeshadow shades. I love the mattes. I think they blend really nice. Anytime I use this palette, I have tons of eyeshadow on my cheek, so I just don't really grab it anymore. I'd grab my Pillow Talk palette. There are so many other palettes that I would grab instead. But this was kind of a rare purchase for me because even when I picked this up, I was sort of avoiding larger palettes. This was a big eyeshadow palette for me. The next prompt is for me to show you my everyday eyeshadow palette, and I think most of you at home could guess what it's going to be. It's the Pillow Talk Instant Eye Palette from Charlotte Tilbury. I love this palette. I use it constantly, and even when I'm not using it solo, if I use a different eyeshadow palette, I generally still bring this in and just pick up a couple shades. Like today, for example, I went in with the Sprint eyeshadow palette from Dior, but I still wanted to pick up a couple shades from this palette. It just has everything you need to create really wearable daily looks. These shadows are all pigmented, they blend easily, not a lot of fallout. It's just fast and easy. And that's what I need in an everyday eyeshadow palette. It has to be unproblematic. I have to know that I can pull this out whether I've already done my foundation or I'm doing eyes first, and it's not gonna get all over the place, it's not gonna smear, I'm not gonna have trouble. You know, I picked this up and I could do a million different things, a million different ways. Fast, easy. I can be on autopilot when I'm doing my makeup. Next is my most colorful eyeshadow palette. So I imagine that the everyday palette was supposed to be maybe your more neutral palette, or perhaps they just assume since it's your everyday palette, it's just kind of browns and, you know, standard earth tones. I think there's a nice variety with that Pillow Talk palette because you do have the Dream section and you have some mauve colors in the beginning. So it's an everyday palette, but it's not really boring. But my most colorful palette, this is what I pulled out. This is the edition #2 Quintessence palette from Chanel. It's not the most vibrant, it's not neon, it doesn't have every color of the rainbow, but it's kind of all over the place. It has silver, gold, red, dark brown, green, it's kind of teal, navy, and then cream. So it is the most colorful palette that I have. It kind of has a little bit of everything. They're just deeper, more muted colors. They're not super bright. Sadly, because it is so colorful, I rarely grab this palette. And it is pretty. I've experimented a little bit because I had previously considered this to be a luxury beauty fail. You know, this was one of my big disappointments of last year. I forget when it came out, last year or 2 years ago. I just don't really touch it because I open this up, and unlike the Pillow Talk palette, I kind of have no idea where I'm going. I don't look at this and intuitively have a look in mind. I look at this and I think, okay, well, you know, let me start swatching these colors on my arm and try to put together some sort of pretty combination, because the last thing you want to do is pull out an eyeshadow palette, start playing with color, you get halfway done, sometimes not even halfway, and you realize that you're stuck. It's beautiful to look at, it's not incredibly practical. Next is my smallest eyeshadow palette. I don't know if this counts, but it's definitely my smallest palette. This is a little Dior palette. I think I got this as a gift with purchase, but it's actually really nice, and I've used it. I've used the lipsticks. I haven't really used these, kind of touched them. But it's not bad for travel, for having in your purse. Like, look at that color payoff. It's so cute and small. Teeny tiny little Dior. My largest eyeshadow palette is the Natasha Denona Love palette, which I picked up this year. This is the year of large palettes for me. I'm finally experimenting. 15 eyeshadows. Size-wise, I think it's not terrible. You know, this isn't an overwhelming size. I know there are some palettes that are huge. They would take up the entire screen. That is just not for me. I wouldn't know what to do with a palette like that. But something like this, I use this. You know, I will pull it out and I will make sure that I put it to use. And the colors are so pretty. The packaging, everything about this palette, I just knew as soon as I saw photos that this was going to be my first Natasha Denona palette. The pinks and the purples, I really don't use it as much as I should, but I pulled it out recently. And if you're sick and tired of the pinks and the reds, you can play with the purples instead. You don't have any neutrals though. You can't really do a wearable everyday eye look. In my opinion, this is the perfect size for a large eyeshadow palette because it gives you variety. You know, there are enough options here that you can feel creative when you pull this out. You know, you don't have to just do the same look every single time, which is how I feel about some of my other palettes. Even though I love them, they're good for one look, maybe two, maybe three. You could come up with so much using this, but it's not overwhelming. You know, it's not so huge. And even storage-wise, I feel like this size isn't so cumbersome that it's taking up too much room and, you know, I don't know where to store it. It's just perfect. Next up is palette that is well worth the hype, and I'm so happy that I got my hands on this palette. This is the Pat McGrath Labs Bronze Seduction palette in all of her glory. When I first got this, I was using it non-stop. I sort of forced myself to put it down because I didn't want to get sick of it. I didn't want you guys to get sick of it. These glitter shades right here, the ones that you have to use your fingers, they're just so unique. They're so interesting. And they take even a simple eye look and they just elevate the look. This is my personal favorite right here, this bronze. I mean, look at her. Swipe. Ooh! That is just so beautiful. And then this shade, this kind of rose gold right here, so pretty. The other colors are really nice. They're high quality, they blend, they're pigmented, they're beautiful, but it's these shades. These are the wow factor. They bring so much drama. This is the perfect night out palette, but still some earth tones. So I think you could create daily looks. This could be just your one palette. Be sure to sign up for that email alert if you're interested in picking up the new Divine Rose 2 palette. And I think there are 2 different lip kits as well. There's a coral and a pink. They look really pretty. I'm not sure which one I'm going to get. I'll choose one or the other. Now this palette, I'm sad to say, is not worth the hype. I'm still happy with it. It's not terrible. I wouldn't call this a flop or a fail. I just don't think it's worth all the attention. This is the Ritualistic Rose palette from Pat McGrath Labs. Right now I feel like I'm 50-50. I have one palette that I love and one palette that I'm sort of so-so about. So hopefully the Divine Rose and the Divine Rose 2 are incredible, and then I'll be loving Pat McGrath again. I just struggle with these eyeshadows, and some of you guys mentioned that maybe I should send it back and try to get a replacement. I just don't know. I don't know if they're meant to be quite as hard as they are. This shadow right here isn't that bad, but then some of the others, they're just not great. And of course I say that, and as I'm swatching them, they're coming off on my fingers beautifully. Maybe I just needed to work down that top layer. You know, sometimes when a palette is pressed so hard, you almost have to get rid of that top part to get down to the eyeshadow. Let's see. Even when I swatch it on my arm, they're not quite as intense as the Bronze Seduction shadows. You know, they come off really nicely on the finger when I'm pressing it in the palette, but as soon as I go to apply it to my lid or apply it to my skin, it doesn't pack quite the same impact. Not terrible, still really pretty. It's a palette that I don't think can be used alone. I think you have to pull in a different palette to be able to create one full look. This shadow right here is the only one that I'm obsessed with, and the other 3 are just kind of, you know, take them or leave them. They're nice. It's just not worth the hype. We'll just leave it at that. Not worth the hype. Still happy that I picked it up, but I'm so glad that I got it on sale, 25% off. If I paid full price for this, then I would be disappointed. Next is an easy one. It's to show my favorite palette from my favorite brand. My favorite brand is Chanel, and my favorite Chanel eyeshadow palette is the Warm Memories 354. I love this little quad. And this could be swapped out for that Le Beige palette, but that's no longer available. I do really love that eyeshadow palette, but this is just perfection. I think it is the perfect everyday palette. In fact, this kind of ties the Charlotte Tilbury Pillow Talk palette for being my everyday palette. I know some of you guys get sick of seeing me in these colors, so I try not to wear it constantly, but if I'm not filming, I could easily just grab this every single day. It is so beautiful. And it's one of the best quality eyeshadow quads from Chanel. Cannot recommend it enough, and it is still available, so pick it up while you can. I don't know if this is limited actually. It's just so stunning. The very last one is to show you my most used eyeshadow palette, and here I have a tie because I think my most used palette is this Le Beige palette from Chanel. I've used this constantly. When I first got this, I was using it non-stop, and I still get so much use out of it. So I feel like it should be this one, even though I haven't hit pan in any of these shadows. But then here, of course, I have Norvina, where I've hit pan in 3, almost 4 of the pans. I definitely got a lot of use out of this palette. Both of them show a lot of wear. I think over time, these would definitely be my 2 most used palettes. And then by the end of the year, I'm sure my Pillow Talk palette will be most used. But for now, I would say these 2. This one is no longer available. It's kind of a legend because the people still talk about that palette like, why was it discontinued? Will they ever bring it back? Remember that Le Beige palette? Ugh, those were the days. They should have made sure they had plenty of stock and it didn't go anywhere, because they would still be selling that palette like hotcakes. It's just so perfect. It's so practical. Now this palette is still available, I think. It's really pretty. You got some purples, some pinks, so it's kind of a whimsical palette. You know, you look at it and you think you can come up with some really dreamy looks. But the reason I got so much use out of this is because I was using these 2 so much. Out of 14 eyeshadows, only 5 are jewel toned and the rest are earth tones. So it's a far more wearable palette than you might realize, which is why it is my most used. and you can certainly tell by the exterior because it looks grimy. And that completes today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up. Leave me your comments, questions down below. I will list all of the prompts in case you'd like to participate. You can drop me a comment. Fill in the blanks with your favorite eyeshadows. As always, I will be linking everything mentioned, everything on my face down below in the description box for your convenience. And for more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.